Oh, my mic was off.
Oh,
Good evening and welcome to Bits and Pieces New York City, where we're going to explore the New York Caribbean and Latin American experience. With me tonight are Richard David and John Aaron. Gentlemen, you could go ahead and introduce yourselves, starting with Richard.
Hey everybody, Richard David. Anansi probably thought tonight was the night to bring on two guests with two first names. I was born in Guyana. I live in Queens, New York, and I'm a district leader. I'm excited for tonight's conversation.
well,
Go ahead, John.
as Richard said, my name is John Aaron. Again, I've got two first names. Biblical David, I got to add slightly on you. I don't know. One over you. I too was also born in Guyana and migrated to the United States. And here I am right now as an adjunct lecturer with the CUNY, one of the CUNY colleges.
So we're back. Okay, gentlemen. We want to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the Caribbean American community. Richard, I want to start with you. You've been in the thick of things. Can you give us a quick gist of what's been going on in our community?
Absolutely. So we know a couple of facts about COVID and what's been happening. We know that this virus has killed a lot of men, predominantly men. We also know that this virus has killed a lot of communities of color, and that includes Black, Brown, Latino residents in New York City. And we also know that these communities have been among the last ones to access or have access to COVID testing and to have access to the vaccine that's being rolled out right now. And so it's a devastating time when you think of, there are so many ways to think about this impact. When you think about the human toll, it's astronomical. Over 25,000 New Yorkers have died from this virus alone, and a lot of them are Caribbean. And they're all over the city. And they look like, a lot of them look like me, actually. And I was actually talking to a funeral director probably over the weekend at Leo F. Kearns. And he was telling me, the most heartbreaking thing that he has seen for the Caribbean community especially is the age group. And so we know this virus has hit older folks harder than younger folks. But what's unique about this community is that folks in their 60s are dying. In other communities and in white communities, that when you talk about age, you're talking about 80, sometimes older than that, maybe late 70s. In the Caribbean community, and I identify as Indo-Caribbean, I believe it's the same for the Afro-Caribbean community and the Afro-Latino and Latino community. Late 50s into 60 is that target age. And so it's had an astronomical human impact. In some families, you're seeing multiple fatalities days apart. Funerals are being planned together. I remember my parents talking about like group marriages because their sisters or brothers are getting married at the same age, and so married them off together. We're planning group funerals in some families. It's really, really devastating, the human toll. And a lot of people, it's hard to explain because we're still going through this, but it's had other impacts. The Caribbean community in New York has been extremely entrepreneurial. We have all kinds of small businesses and jerk chicken spots and grocery stores and jewelry, and they have suffered in this crisis too. And our bars and restaurants, the bartenders aren't working right now. Some of them are undocumented. They have not received a salary or support from the government or anybody in months. And then you look at housing. I mean, I can go on and on. I know small homeowners who haven't received rent from their tenants in months. And some of those same tenants are the ones that haven't been paid in months. The food lines are longer than ever. We're seeing pantries pop up. And some people joke about this. You left the Caribbean to come here and you're standing up on a food line. It's not something to joke about. And we have to take away some of that stigma. But the impact of COVID has been so exponential. I can't think of who it hasn't affected. And it's affected us. It's really affected us. And it's a heartbreaking issue.
All right, Richard, I'm going to come back to you with more of those details. John, as an educator, this thing, it slowly started to creep on us in December of 2019. But then, by March 2020, struck us hard. Can you recall the moment when it dawned upon you that, hey, we were in the midst of something very serious here?
Yes, very much so. I started teaching a class in the business department at the college, and I have a Tuesday, Thursday class, and the first class was a Tuesday. I went there. This was in-person teaching, in classroom. So I taught the Tuesday, I taught the Thursday, I taught the following Tuesday, and Wednesday morning I got a call from CUNY saying, we're going online. All classes are canceled, which was devastating because I like teaching in the classroom and having that interaction with students. Going online was a totally different ball of wax. And that was in March. And I haven't taught in class since then.
Wow. So Richard, have you what's been happening to the children based on what you do and your own knowledge? How has this impacted the Caribbean American kid?
Yeah, and I think it's really to what Mr. Aaron has said. So we saw, and actually in some ways, this isn't necessarily unique to Caribbean kids, but now they are doing remote learning as the primary way of getting an education. And if you think about it, the entire school year has been a wash, right? Because parts of last year was disrupted. A lot of this school year is disrupted. And this looks like it's going to go into the summer. So you have families who are not just remote learning and teaching at home with the kids, but dad is home, mom is home, or they're out working. And so this is an added strain that we didn't have before. And I think by now a lot of families are getting into the groove of this, and we don't know what the impact is going to be. And in some ways, it has propelled us forward. I don't want to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, because there are some silver linings in this, right? For a long time now, we've talked about digital learning and the digital divide. We have a challenge now. We have to address these issues. And now this crisis has forced us in the direction where we're all doing digital learning. We're going to the doctor digitally. We're purchasing a lot of consumer goods and things digitally. And so we're going to work digitally. So our environment has transformed. And so the virus has had a devastating toll, but it's also been a silver lining in some ways. And one of the ways that we don't get to talk about enough, and it does matter when you talk about Caribbean families. Some Caribbean families are single-parent households. Some Caribbean families have, both parents, still together. But every Caribbean family I know was working night and day. The parents, they were hardworking, and work always came first. And they didn't give that up in this virus, but I think they're spending more time together, and a lot of families are rediscovering family time and what that means. And it's becoming a global thing, because now I hear families, scheduling Friday night conversations, and it's not just limited to the immediate family. Someone is logging in from Trinidad, another person is logging in from Florida, and all of a sudden, another silver lining where families are spending more time together than they ever have before. And I think that that's a positive thing.
I think, Nancy, from the perspective, and some of it Richard alluded to, how it has impacted learning environment from the students' perspective, impacted them in two ways. One, economically, but most of the students going to community college are working part-time and going to school. Some of them have lost their jobs. So now they're home, they're switched to online learning, which, as you guys know, is not the same as that in-person interaction and learning in that learning environment. So now they're forced to be online. But a lot of them don't have a Wi-Fi service, don't even have a laptop. So that's an added stress to that student. I mean, my first class after the COVID was hit, I had 37 students in the classroom. By the time we got online, it had dropped to 25. There's 12 students dropped off the radar right away. And along the way, I lost another 7 or 8 students because they were home, some of them have kids. They're competing for the same laptop. Before the students were issued laptop and tablet, they're competing for the same bandwidth at home. And that has had a significant impact on students, economic just being one of them. So a lot of what Richard alluded to, I can certainly attest to hearing that from my students directly.
100%. And my nieces, I have 3 beautiful nieces, my brother's daughters, and they spend some time here. And it has been disruptive. They're not learning in the same way. And in fact, class time is now divided in 10-minute increments, depending on the age group. And a lot of it is study time with yourself, and you're checking in with a teacher. It's different. It's very, very different. And it's having. And so I'll tell you very specifically. She's getting ready for her state exams, and next year. And so if she doesn't do well on those state exams, it's going to have a lifetime impact on the middle school she goes to, potentially the high school she goes to, and we're worried. Her parents are both working, and so they're not able to be there and to tutor her and really support her fully because they're working, and so it does have a real human impact. And she's a bright girl. I think she's incredible, and she's probably watching this. So she is like many young people are learning to deal with this, but we don't know what the toll really is, and we probably won't know for a little bit of time when we think about the education of our young people.
I think if we think of it, of students, let's say you're in the 5th grade and you lost a whole year. You're starting not necessarily in the 6th grade this year. You're probably still in the 5th grade because you'd have lost that chunk of education. Bless you. That chunk of education for one whole year. Think about the impact it has had on new immigrant families. And in our case, most of Caribbean immigrants who are new in the United States don't have the necessary support structure of other families and other relatives. And you're struggling to not only make a living, many of us working 2 or 3 jobs and having to support kids in that type of environment. So I think, and I'm speaking from a Caribbean perspective, it has had a more devastating effect on new immigrants, particularly those from the Caribbean, who are struggling to make ends meet. And so I'm afraid that students who lost last year will have a very difficult time catching up in terms of education going forward at the primary school level, the high school level, and the college level.
Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if there are folks watching at home and they're looking for resources that might be available because you're kind of going through this as well, I encourage you to check out the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development. They're offering a lot of after-school programs, tutoring programs through nonprofit organizations, and even like extracurricular activities that are related to science, technology, arts, math. And so there are ways for you to plug in for your kids all around the city in a digital way. And so I encourage you to take advantage of that as well. And these are new opportunities. My niece is next to, for example, Junior High School 210 in Ozone Park. And they have a great after-school program, and then they have a weekend program. It's digital, but they mail these science kits home to the kids. It's free. You just got to go and then show up to class, digital class, for 3 sessions. So they're really great incentives. And so if you're at home and you're watching this, there are some resources that you want to tap into for your kids.
Okay. Do you guys think? Well, and I know to some extent, Richard, you would have, grown up and been educated in the digital age. But especially for you, John, do you think some of us, from, born in the 70s and 60s and so on, can we really relate to what the young people are going through at this time? Do you think we can really get it, even though we are also a part of what's happening with the pandemic?
Is that for me? Either one of us. I mean, look, I think that this is affecting different age groups differently. Absolutely. When we look at older folks, and I'm talking about much older who don't have the same fluency with computers, it's hard because they can't even get online to schedule a vaccine appointment. And so they're relying on their kids and others to do this. And if you've been on that website, you're refreshing, and this can be a full-time job, just trying to get a vaccine appointment. And so it affects folks who are a lot older in that way. And then I'll jump to the other end. If you're very young, I think that there are some things that have come out of this. TikTok, for example, with young folks is blowing up. It's a really great platform to make short videos, and I try to focus on the learning environment and what skills are being developed there. And so they're editing, producing, choreographing videos and entertainment. And Caribbean people, we love our entertainment. And so if our young people are learning some of those skills at an early age, I see that as a plus. And there's a trade-off, right? They're losing some human social skills, but this is a temporary phase. We believe it's temporary, until we get the rates down and the vaccine immunization rates up, the COVID infection rate down. Now for folks in the middle, I think that it goes back to some of the challenges I talked about earlier with balancing budgets in a tough time, maybe, or figuring out how to find daycare for those kids. So my mom is gracious to watch my brother's kids, and I watch them too, and I love watching them. But not everyone has that resource. But Caribbean people, we pull in the family and we do it as a village, right? That's how we get raised. But there's so many people who are not living with family, and I imagine that it's a lot harder for them. But I think everyone here has a really interesting story that we'll be telling for generations.
I think that every generation, education in any generation has its challenges. If you think back, and we probably represent 3 generations here on this show, but if you think back to each of our generations and what some of the challenges we had of learning, these young people don't have the same challenges, but they do have challenges, right? We didn't have the internet as we first. We had to go to the library and pull up microfiche and look up and do research and do a lot more writing by hand I must add, and on the computer. So those were our challenges. The challenges they have now might be getting on the Wi-Fi or getting frustrated by not being able to Google a question. But those challenges can be overcome because there's so many more resources at the disposal of young people these days that they shouldn't consider it a challenge. It's just another challenge. They shouldn't consider it insurmountable. There are other resources. Richard outlaid a lot of resources that the city provides. The resources are there. So there's just a question of rolling away the rocks and finding the solution to those challenges under the rocks.
Okay. And John, based on a point that Richard just brought up, with the daycare and taking care of kids and so on, do you think that one of the things that we had back in the day, the extended family, the support of the extended family, do you think that is being sorely missed at this time?
Yes, I think because we are beginning to assimilate into a culture that's different from the culture from which we emerged. The culture that we emerged from was the extended family culture. It would have been unheard in our culture putting your mother or grandmother into a nursing home. First of all, we didn't have nursing homes because there was no need for them. Your mother, your grandmother, your father, your grandfather stayed with you until death. Do your part. Here, everybody is trying to make a living and you don't have the time to care for the extended family. So you tend to move them out. But that's part of the American culture that unfortunately, a lot of Caribbean people are finding themselves assimilating or putting the parents or the grandparents into nursing home or some home for the indigent. I think that is lost on us as the Caribbean people.
Okay. And Richard, how do you think what's been the direct impact on, say, child services, caring for the elderly, the impact on these very vulnerable institutions?
Yeah, look, I used to work at the Administration for Children's Services. It's, they care for the largest population of vulnerable kids in the country. And in this time, we know that reports of abuse, neglect, and other really heinous crimes are down. And so we don't know if those have stopped, those incidents. And what's likely happening is that they have not stopped, but they're going unreported. And so they're, in this pandemic, when families are all home, I'm very worried. There are vulnerable kids and some seniors too, but some vulnerable kids who are potentially not having any external intervention in some very violent situations. And so, and there are other ways to look at this as well. We know that our communities have dealt with challenges around domestic violence and alcoholism and other, related addictions that lead, that sometimes lead to violence in the home. And gender-based violence and violence against women is something that is prevalent. It happens in the Caribbean community, and we believe that that's something that is continuing to occur here. When you have economic devastation in the way that you do, it also forces women and to stay in. For example, it forces some women to stay in relationships or in marriages or in other situations that might otherwise be very, very unhealthy or even dangerous. And a lot of our Caribbean communities are also in expanded households. And sometimes, the violence makers or the folks that are, causing bullying and other unhealthy behaviors are not your partner. They're other members of that household. And you don't have an opportunity to escape because you're trapped economically. And those are real situations that have been existing in the Caribbean. They exist here in New York. And I believe that they're worse now. We're hearing about them less, but I believe that they're worse now. And I know that because I get a lot of calls and a lot of people reach out to me for help in a very discreet way. And so I can't say that without also saying that there's again, resources out there to help. And even in this pandemic, there are discrete ways that you can ask for help and assistance and receive trusted guidance. And so if you are in, if you're in New York City, the Jahaji Sisters, they work with Indo-Caribbean women. They're a good, trusted partner to reach out to. There's the South Queens Women's March. They're another organization that you can reach out to. There's Safe Horizon. They're a citywide organization. A lot of their folks are actually Caribbean. They speak multiple languages. So if your language is Spanish or Bengali or something else, they can help you. And they have so much expertise in doing this discreetly that I encourage folks to reach out and get that help. Even if you don't want to act on your situation right now, you just want to collect information so that you have your options available to you. Do it. If you feel like it's safe to do it.
Okay. We're gonna take a little break from the heavy topic and come with a lighter bit and piece shortly, right? We're gonna talk about something that a lot of us, when we first came here and started putting on the television, we would confront time and again, which is the weather, right? So we're gonna talk about something a little light, and then we're gonna come back to our COVID conversation. All right, we'll be back shortly.
As you can see, it's snowing today, and I absolutely love the snow. It's been hitting my face really, really hard, but I love it nonetheless. And I'm having a grand time, and I plan to play in it today. So I trust you. If I have any other friends and family who love the snow, come on and let's party in it.
So, John, tell me about your first winter in New York.
Oh my goodness! I'm listening to the young lady, and I'm saying, was that my experience? My first experience with coming to New York in snow was 18 inches of snow. Ironically, coming in was a night flight, and as we approached over New York City, I could see all these beautiful lights. It reminded me of when we put together what we call back home the Christmas tree with cotton. So we didn't have snow in Guyana, we had cotton, we had put it in the branches, and we would have what we used to call fairy lights. But in fact, these little blinking lights snug between the cotton balls and the limbs of the tree. And it provided such a beautiful visual. Well, flying over New York City, I saw that same picture of lights flickering between the snow. Boy, but when I hit the ground 12 hours later, and I saw all this stuff on the road, it still looked beautiful because it was fresh white snow. Another 24 hours, there was lots of carbon dioxide and lots of ash on the snow, and it totally took away my whole perception of what this snow was. And that was my welcome to New York, not to mention the fact that snow was up to my kneecaps. But ironically, I did not feel cold. And they said, well, you brought the heat with you. But I know by the next winter, I was saying, what am I doing here? I was hooded up, wrapped up, 10, 12 layers. But, you get used to it, you figure, hey, it comes and it goes. I mean, what can you do? Is either you do that or you run to some sort of warm climb. And I can't afford to keep running backwards and forwards. So you take it in stride.
Okay. What was your first winter like with them?
I come to America. It's true. It's like my coming to America story. I too landed in a big blizzard, and maybe it's the same blizzard. But my family is they're from Mycone, Dundee, Mycone. We barely had like running water and consistent electricity back then. The dam was made of mud. And so I'd never left my town. I think I went to Georgetown once before that. And so that also meant that we didn't have a lot of clothes and those kinds of things. We were very poor. And when we're coming to New York, you got to put on your best outfit, right? Because you're coming to New York. And my best outfit was this like silk shirt. I think crinkly is a word that they use to describe either the material or the shirt. And when I landed at JFK Airport, the silky shirt turned to like a wet shirt. I was freezing. It was also short sleeve. So that was my first welcome to New York, and I remember it vividly because I was freezing. Now everybody's looking at me laughing. You're coming to the United States in December, and you come with a short sleeve shirt. What's wrong with you? But it was my best outfit. It was my only like good, outfit.
As they say back home, your Sunday best.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's get another clip and we'll be back shortly.
When you experience weather like we did 2 days ago, do you feel like you want to run back to Guyana?
Quite the contrary. I enjoy it. As a matter of fact, I think about the disbelief that I had as a child.
Okay.
About the realness of snow and the realness of this type of weather. So quite the contrary. I sort of marvel in it, and I just sort of just enjoy it.
Right. Because I like to tell people, and it's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Years ago too, I even ate it, So that's another thing. I actually had to taste it,
Yeah, I've heard a few people who said that they've tasted it as well.
Just had to get a little bit just to see if it was actually, if it tasted like shaved ice, it was looking so good.
Did you eat it off of the ground, or did you eat it as it was coming on your meat?
Off of the banister.
Okay.
Because it was so high, it piled, but so I assumed it was clean.
Yeah.
I had to get a little piece, snack on a bit.
Yeah. The other day I walked around in it, and I was kind of opening my mouth as it was going on.
Same thing 2 days ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just amazing that it melts.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and yet still you're seeing all the evidence, it's just the whole wonder of the weather.
So did you try eating the snow, John? Did it remind you of crush ice?
No, I don't recall eating it, but I recall opening, like Abby said, opening my mouth and letting the snow fall in just to get a taste of it. But scooping it up and playing with it in a bowl and stuff, it was something new for me. You had seen it on TV, but you have to experience it. But I must admit, after like the second or third winter, the novelty of it wore off. And now it become more of a bother more than a novel idea, novel thing. But if it was a new experience and you wanted to immerse yourself in this snow, you wanted to walk in it, you want to pick it up, you want to look at it, pretty much analyze it, because we had nothing like that at all in Guyana. See?
Richard, have you found that we in the Caribbean community, have we fully embraced the season? Have you heard of, say, a lot of us going upstate to ski and that kind of thing? Do you think we from the Caribbean we really embrace the winter?
Yeah, I certainly do, and I know I see other Caribbean people and my friends. We go skiing, we go surfing, surfboarding, and I even went to Iceland. I like it. One of my friends wants to go to Alaska. I don't know if I'll do that. But I've embraced it. I like the change of the weather, but I also like to break it up around January. I like to go to a warm place. But my computer is dying. If you give me 1 second to just plug it back in.
I think the experience, you have to have that experience. Now in Guyana, we had the rainy season and the dry season. And so you got accustomed to that. And here we have a similar, except we have 4 seasons here: winter, spring, summer, and fall. And you know, the longer you live here, the more accustomed you get to it, and you just cope with it. You just deal with it. One of the amazing things that happened to me was after I'd been here for about a year, I went back to Guyana the very next year, a year after. And in Guyana, when you took a shower and you kind of put on some powder on down deodorant and stuff, you were good to go. And you were fresh for most of the day. When I went back to Guyana, I found myself having taken a shower, gotten dressed, deodorant and everything, deodorized, and come out on the road. And in 10 minutes, I'm like perspiring like hell. All my shirt is wet to the point where I was embarrassed. And my friend says, "Oh, don't worry, it's the snow. You're trying out because of the."
I've had the same experience. I've had a similar experience, and I'll tell you this. And sorry, Nancy, the summer is actually sometimes harder than the winter to get through because it gets so hot. In fact, I sometimes want to get away. But speaking of like Americanizing, I know that I've developed all kinds of like food allergies and things like that I never really had, and my family they don't have. And so yeah, we've become very, very American. You know, that we're products of our environment.
Yep.
Okay. Back to the COVID and the pandemic. Is as we look ahead, you know, I know some people would say, you know, that when things get really bad, that usually there's some opportunities that would come out of that, you know, that situation, that dark situation. John, what do you see happening good coming out of the pandemic?
I think it will have a significant impact on the work environment, first of all, because companies now will require, I believe they will tell themselves, we don't require as much of a footprint in the building, whereas they would not have to rent as much space because some of the employees work very well from home. So you might find that would be extended in the work environment. You might find it extending itself into academia, where rather than having students attend the college away from home, the college can come to them. And so they don't have that much to do in terms of physically going to the building. Clearly for sports, it has had an impact on sports. And I'm curious to see the outcome from the pandemic vis-a-vis outdoor sports versus indoor sports, and how those will evolve or be reshaped as a result of the pandemic.
What do you see happening, Richard?
All right, so you know, opportunities coming out of this. I think you know I agree with Mr. Aaron that the work situation is going to change significantly, or I certainly hope so, because I don't want to return to a. You know, I remember at the start of this virus when New York City said you got to stay home and you can't go out, or the state. A part of me was like, yes, like this. When else in our lives are we ever going to be told we have to stay home, right? And now it's just been too long. But I think other like silver linings in that could come out of this is we are also figuring out how to, you know, like me, for example, I'm learning to cook. I have found ways to cope during this virus and being in the house so much and having more time on my hands than I did before. And a lot of the men in my family, they know how to cook really well, and so do the women. But the men, they usually turn to them to cook for weddings and religious events and those kinds of things. And so I want to become a really good cook. And now I don't, you know, I'm not like a deeply, I don't go to like the mosque a lot or anything, or I don't play a musical instrument. And some of these things I find my friends, they are really good at. So I'm like, all right, if I could become really good at cooking food, I would have like had a cultural thing that I can say, all right, I can do this. So I've been making like a lot of curries, and, you know, I think that's a silver lining. I've also been, and, you know, I want, this is a double-edged sword, right? I think, and I kind of touched on this earlier. A lot of our folks have multiple chronic conditions, right? They're not just. It's so unusual that we find Caribbean folks and older folks sometimes with just diabetes. Usually, it's like diabetes and heart disease and blood pressure and something else. And the average life expectancy is actually a lot lower than the average New Yorker. Through this pandemic, I'm hoping that folks discover healthy eating and ways to become healthier through this. Because if you're staying still and you're not going out like you used to anymore, the downside of that is you're going to experience potentially weight gain. Your body is potentially going to change. Your heart rate decreases, and a lot of these things that you have to figure out how you're going to change. And I encourage you to find safe ways to do that. Figure out how you're going to use this time. Another silver lining, there are a lot of, and this goes back to like the digital thing. There are a lot of online games that have popped up, really cool family-oriented games. And so, you can kind of, there was a time when you used to say you're, monitoring how much online activity your children had was a real problem and it was a real challenge. It's still a challenge now. But I think there are alternative ways to potentially embrace some of that by playing some of these games with your kids. And they're group oriented, they are with your extended family. And I think that those are some really good avenues for you to be engaged and really feel like you're not so disconnected from your loved ones and your family and your community.
John, well, we know you involved with cricket in the New York area, cricket in the USA. What happened in 2020 with regard to the cricket season, and what do you see happening, moving forward?
Well, the cricket season last year was significantly impacted by the pandemic because, as you know, cricket needs a wide expanse of spaces to play. And since the New York City Parks Department controls most of the parks where cricket are played, and they were not issuing permits or they were suspending permits, that affected the tournaments and the league. However, it turned out after a while, the natives began to get restless and wanted to get out there in the parks. And the Parks Department were they turned a blind eye in the sense that if you were in a park and you were playing cricket or stuff, the parks police would come through and they wouldn't enforce any regulations. But at the same time, you couldn't come back and sue the city or the parks because the city and the Parks Department had put a cap on the number of people in the park, suspended the permits and so on. But a lot of cricket was still played because guys found ways to hold tournaments. So you had a lot of one-off tournaments, 20 tournaments, and that sort of thing, and they were able to find enough grounds. So even though you did not have a full cricket season for all of the 7 or 8 leagues in New York City, there was still a fair amount of cricket played. Some of that cricket was played under the CDC protocols and the COVID-19 protocols, where guys wore masks. The governing body for cricket in the United States, the U.S. Cricket Association, they came out and they issued a set of guidelines. Depends on where you're feeling on the ground, you have to wear a mask. If you're out on the boundary, you could remove the mask. Some players followed those guidelines. Unfortunately, some didn't. But I have not heard, and like we said, knock on wood, any deaths occurring from people who contracted the virus as a result of playing cricket. Going forward this year, with the slight decline and the emergence of the vaccine, we're hoping that a lot more cricket can be played across the United States for that matter.
Okay, that'd be great news for a lot of folks. All right, gentlemen, I'm really happy that you were able to come on, join us, share a few bits and pieces with our audience. So I'll give you each a chance to give some closing remarks.
Okay.
Richard.
All right, Mr. Aaron. Look, I'll say this. First of all, I said that I'm a district leader in New York. It means that I want to encourage people to vote and to participate in elections. And the Caribbean community has a huge, presence in New York. And one way to exercise the presence and our power in New York to support things like cricket and other, things that are close to this community is by voting for the next mayor and your city council members. We have a huge election that is going to be occurring in June. Just about every office in New York City is up for election. And so which candidates are talking to the Caribbean community? And when we say Caribbean, we're not one community. We can be Indo-Caribbean, we can be Afro-Caribbean, we can be Chinese Caribbean, but we have some shared interests. And so what are those? And we can all advocate for those things together. And so I want to make sure that we're focusing on that. We're utilizing our power in New York City because that's why we're here. And I want to thank you for having us come on this program tonight. I hope that this is a wild success, and I hope to come back again. I can't wait to come back again. I hope that you'll invite me. And Mr. Aaron, it's been a pleasure to see you here and off of the cricket field.
Similarly here, Richard, and I want to thank you too. I want to thank Nancy for inviting me and having me on. And just to piggyback on what Richard said, from a socio-political perspective, a lot of Caribbean people residing in the New York metropolitan area are either citizens or in some way involved. Even if you're a green card holder, you have to become socially and politically involved because it affects you. It affects your family, it affects your livelihood. And I think that Caribbean people must recognize that we've got a tremendous amount of power in the numbers that we have. And those numbers, as Richard can attest to, can play a significant role in deciding who governs us, whether it's at the district leader level, at the city council level, at the state level, at the federal level. And we must use that strength that we have to collectively change that conversation where we are just a minority and we're just another group of people. I think the cricketers themselves must come together and ask those politicians, with all due respect to Richard, what are you going to do for me if I vote for you? Because it's a quid pro quo situation, whether you like it or not. You go up there to represent your constituents, but are you really representing the interests of all of your constituents? And if you got a block of people who are interested in cricket, and cricket has a lot more to bring to it than just the sport. My club, for instance, Atlantis Cricket Club in New York, we say to ourselves, we are more than just cricket. We have a scholarship fund, we have a lot of food drives, we have a lot of clothing collection and so on. So we do more than just cricket. And by doing that, we're becoming socially involved in our community. But similarly, we would like the politicians to help us. We need grants. Cunningham Park has 14 or 15 baseball fields, not one cricket field. Yet still so many cricketers reside in the borough of Queens. We need to change that. We need to have that conversation. Are the facilities representative of the constituents? I say no. We need to change that. And so I hope that platforms like this will reach the ears of politicians that they need to involve us and they need to give back something rather than just ask for a vote.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. It was a pleasure having you here. Thank you, all the listeners, all the viewers out there who joined us tonight. It was really good having you. And stay tuned for the notices with regard to bits and pieces of New York. Thank you, and we're out.
Thank you, Richard. Great being on with you.
Nice to see you.
Right.
I don't know that a lot of Guyanese feel this great disconnect that we once felt between the US life and the Guyana life. I don't know that there is this great disconnect. So there is not this great sense of wonder with all things here, because there's this quiet sense that one day they can experience it.
Right.
Well, whereas I never really thought that I could experience this experience.
Mm.
So I don't know. So I think for me as a child, I mean, my obsession with snow was really sort of ginormous, because I actually remember, and it's really a funny story. I'm actually remembering in this moment me praying for God to transform rain into snow. That is how obsessed I was.
With
Well, not obsessed, but that is how much I really thought about the snow, you know. And that's why I also sort of felt like it could be real, but it could not be real, because as a child, I had this thing that whatever I prayed for would come through. So because God never transformed, the
Wow.
rain into snow, I wasn't 100% sure that